If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. Hello, thank you for watching. If any of you have any stories you'd like to submit to me, then make sure you do to my email in the description. I love reading them. Hope you're all having a great day. Now let's get to the stories. I'm not a park ranger, but I have a terrifying story that happened to me. So it's late spring, heavy rain, it's flooded, and the public hunting grounds are shut, so I decide to go fishing in the shallows with my buddy. We have a great time, don't catch anything and it's getting dark, so we light a fire to dry off before heading back. As the sunlight is now being swallowed up, we hear something I can only describe as a blood-curdling scream from the distance. It's like a little girl, almost. We think maybe it's frogs. But then we hear twigs snapping, sounding much louder and closer. It could have been maybe 30 feet or less away from us at the tree line. We run out of there and laugh it off. Now fast forward 8 years later, I'm on a lunch break and telling the story to my lead. He pulls up a video on his phone. It's the same scream, but it turned out to be made by a mountain lion. I used to be an avid camper. I live in the Philippines. Now there's one night camping that I'm never gonna forget. The area I was in was supposed to be completely empty but me. That's what the ranger overseeing the site said. So I felt safe going there. I knew nothing was probably gonna happen. I thought, well, the biggest threat I have out here is gonna be humans. Even though I trusted other campers, I never felt safe sleeping with them near. So to my surprise, I see a campfire lit in the distance. I think, well, the least I can do is go and say hello, and maybe go and have a conversation or something, or at least be on good terms and let them know that I'm here in case I startle them. So I go and make my way. As I'm walking there, I don't realise how quick night has fallen. I don't have to worry too much though, because I can still see where my campfire is. As I'm walking, I get this horrible feeling that I simply cannot shake. It's almost as though all of the sounds of the wildlife has come to a complete stop. It kind of looks as though I'm watching a silent film, and something bad's about to happen. I don't know what this is, but I can't shake it. Anyway, I eventually get up to where the campsite should be. I call out, hello, how are you doing? And there's no reply back. I think this is odd. I eventually get up onto the hilltop and I can see the fire. I can see everything there. I look around, no signs of life at all. I think that's weird. I decide to leave a little note saying, hey, I'm just the other camper, don't be worried by me. We can have a conversation and maybe go fishing, and write my name and number on a piece of paper. I turn around, and suddenly, all of the sound picks up again. It's so strange, I don't know if it is a lapse in concentration, or my mind playing tricks on me, but I don't like it. I go to turn back to see if maybe the person has returned, and I'm more focused now. And why he shocks me. I turn back, and the tent is in tatters, the whole place looks wrecked, and the campfire looks as though it hasn't been lit for days. My note? Well, that's the only thing I can see. Cindering, sitting just next to the fire, or should I say where the fire was. Needless to say, I sprint all the way back to my campsite. I'm so scared that I hike all the way back to my car. I've never went camping again in that area since. It was March and me and my boyfriend John and 2 others decided to go camping on an island 45 minutes away from the city. The weather wasn't great, but we're seniors in high school and wanted to get away for the weekend to smoke and drink. So we packed 2 tents, firewood, and load into my truck. We arrive at the state park at about 4 PM and set up camp. My boyfriend and I took 1 tent while our friends took the other. So we start hanging around, not doing much. The park ranger told us that besides the other man by himself, we're the only ones there for that night because the weather isn't good. We didn't see any other tents or cars, so we figured that guy's left. I don't quite remember what happened before I fell asleep, but I remember waking up at 1 AM to John getting dressed. I sleepily ask him where he's going. He says to use the bathroom. There's a restroom facility 2 campsites down from us. A few minutes later I hear him yelling in the distance. At this point, I was too tired, cold and lazy to get up. Plus, I'm a small woman. John's bigger, so I wouldn't have been able to help. When he comes back to the tent, he looks a little flustered and says, "Well, I found the other camper. He's a big guy staring at me as I went to pee." I yelled at him and approached him, but he walked away. At that point I'm freaking out a little, but it's 1 AM. I felt safe. I went back to sleep, but was woken at 3 AM by the sound of my truck door slamming. I sent my boyfriend to check it out and he said that the lights are on but nothing's taken. I figured I left the light on by accident and I was just hearing things and go back to sleep. I'm now awoken once again at 5 AM to the sound of cop cars and sirens. The cop rips open our tent and demands that we come outside. All 4 of us are dazed and confused, wondering if someone had reported our drinking. But no, the cops say they receive a 911 call saying the campers at the nearby state parks would be dead and they should send an ambulance. Obviously we're not dead, but they ask if we saw anything. My boyfriend describes the man in the bathroom and the yelling that followed. My friend spoke up and said, "Oh yeah, I heard the yelling." Shortly after that is when John came into our tent to sleep. John looks confused and says, "I never went in your tent last night, I didn't want to freak you out." My friend looked very scared and said, "Yeah you did, you come and laid down and slept with us for like an hour. Then you said you had to go to the car and left." John and I look at each other and say that no, John never actually went into the tent. The cops search the campgrounds but find no evidence of another camper. The ranger then said that the guy had come in and paid his fee in cash, so he couldn't be traced either. So I grew up in a town in a relatively rural part of England. Once upon a time, the whole area had been ancient woodland, but by the time I grew up, it's an urban sprawl met with only a few pockets of woodland, entirely surrounded by housing estates. I used to hate walking through those woods. The quickest way to get anywhere from the street I grew up on was to take a footpath that ran from one end of the street around the houses and then through maybe a 1/4 of a mile wide patch of woodland before you get to the heart of the town. It only took a few minutes if you took the most direct path, but my heart would be racing the whole time. I had to walk through there to get to school or to the shops when my mum sent me to get groceries, and knowing that my older brothers would tell me that the woods are haunted by the ghosts of people who were hung at the gallows that once stood there. When I was a teenager, I became scared of the woods for a different reason though. During the winter months when it was already dark, when I walked home from school, older kids would sometimes lurk in the trees to try and scare the life out of the younger kids, demanding what money they had or even their mobile phones. But I'm an adult now, so when I visited my mum in my hometown last winter, the woods no longer held any fear for me. It had snowed properly for the first time in a few years, and my mum, in typical mum fashion, immediately informed her elderly neighbour that her daughter was visiting and would happily take her dog for a walk so she didn't have to risk the icy pavements. The morning after I arrived back there, I found myself walking down the footpath into the woods with a fat grey, around the muzzle old Labrador in tow. It didn't often snow in the city I lived, so I decided to take a recent purchase, a DSLR camera, out with me for some photography. The fat old dog and I wandered around the woods for 20 minutes or so, the dog hobbling a bit in the snow, occasionally making a half-hearted attempt to chase wood pigeons, while I snapped photographs of snow-laden branches and the stark black and white landscape. It was quite early on a Sunday morning, so no one else is around. There are very few other footprints in the snow. I was quite enjoying the walk, but I'd started getting cold and didn't want it to exhaust the neighbour's dog. So I was just about to head back when I hear something moving quickly towards us. Someone was heading rapidly down the main path. The dog and I are currently out of view on the side of the path, but only for a few more seconds. I don't really know why it occurred to me to hide, but I did so without thinking. I hesitated for a moment, and then, mindful of memories of being accosted by hooded teenagers and robbed of my very first brick phone, I stepped off to the side of the path and hid among the bushes and trees. The lens on my camera at the time was worth about a month's rent, and I guess I was worried that some opportunist robber would see it and decide it as an easy target. My dog hesitated for a moment as I tugged at his lead, but followed me into the bushes just in time. I crouched down with one hand on his head. I'm now willing him to be quiet as a person came into view on the path just a few feet away. I didn't really get a good look at him, but I saw that it was a man, still wearing a dark jacket and a red baseball cap, moving in a hurry. Thankfully, the dog remains quiet, and then the man's gone. When the man was well out of sight of the dog, I stepped back onto the path and decided to take a few more pictures before leaving. When we finally start heading home, now the near silence of the woods was broken by the loud drone of a helicopter overhead. I couldn't see it clearly until we're on the footpath behind the houses and out from under the trees. But once there, I could see it's a police helicopter and it's circling over the woods. I turned the fat old dog to my mum's neighbour, and I don't have any incident and completely forget about the helicopter until a little later when my mum switched the radio on in her kitchen so that we could listen to some music while we ate lunch. It's a local radio station, and their top news story was that the police were hunting a man who had beaten someone almost to death on the footpath, the same one that we're on. The suspect was described as tall, wearing a red hat and a dark jacket. I saw him fleeing the scene of the crime. It was only my paranoia about my camera that prevented me from meeting him, in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, with literally no one around. This happened a few years back in 2005, when I was around 10, about to turn 11, which would have made my sister 14. We came from a pretty small town in the UK, where not much of interest usually happens. Our main attraction is a local shopping centre. My parents would quite often give us pocket money and let us take the bus into town to go to the cinema located inside the shopping centre on weekends. Being a video game obsessed nerd, it's my ritual at the time to save up money and buy discounted pre-owned games from the game station in the mall. There was something about the build-up and anticipation reading those little booklets I used to have in the game cases on the way back. I'd be off in my own little world, reeling off the facts about the games, or what I'd learnt in gaming magazines, to my poor sister who'd smile and nod, humouring me until we got home and she could escape for a breather while I locked myself in my bedroom for a full weekend of gaming non-stop. A few months prior to this particular trip, she had moved from a run-down council house in a bad part of town to a much newer one closer to where we lived. Between our two neighbourhoods ran a main road with a bus stop near to the underpass where we used to get off the bus on our way back from the shopping centre. We'd then use the underpass across the road, which is surrounded by wooded areas on either side, before walking the remaining 15 minutes or so from the bus stop to our house. We lived close to the kind of suburban zone where buses stopped only at the entrance to the estate and never actually ventured into the streets where the houses stood, so my grand's house was the closest to the two bus stops. On this day, I followed my sister to the bus, then off it, distracted with the stack of games in my hand, my head in the clouds looking at the screen grabs and the blurbs on the back of the cases as usual. I got the vague sense that my sister was a little tense, but I figured that she's just in a rush to get back home. Now it's worth pointing out that at this time, we're in the middle of a family feud, and my parents aren't on speaking terms with my gran. It's been a while since we had gone to visit her, and my dad had pretty much banned us from seeing her. My sister decides to forego our usual route home via the underpass, and instead leads me towards where our grand's house is located, in the opposite direction of our own. This surprised me, and being an impatient jerk, I question if this is necessary. And why is she taking me to grand's house when I desperately want to go and play games? She infuriated me further by giving me vague answers like it seems like a good day for a walk or see how she's doing. Thinking back on it now makes a rock sink deep in my stomach, for I told her dad had forbidden it and that I was going to walk the other way back to our home by myself so that she can continue alone. Of course, being the older, street-savvy sister, she wouldn't let me, claiming our parents would be infuriated with her if she let me do so. We keep on walking in the direction of Gran's house, and for the first time, I start to feel uneasy. I notice my sister checking over her shoulder, picking up the pace, telling me to hurry up, and I think it's very weird she keeps on loudly exclaiming how everyone is waiting for us around the corner at Gran's. Eventually, we arrive and Gran's surprised to see us, inviting us in. We have some biscuits and I play with her dog for a while as we wait for our parents to pick us up. Fast forward a month or so later, and the incident is more or less forgotten about by me when our town's first and only case of a missing child hits the news. It was on everyone's lips, and I even remember my parents and my parents' friends joining the search and rescue, scouring the woodland. Tragically, a young boy went missing and was found in the woods shortly after. The whole town was rocked. The main suspect ended up killing himself before the police had a chance to question him. We're all shocked by what had happened. Now, the boy had been abducted while walking through an underpass on his way to school. The underpass is maybe 5 or so stops along from where my sister and I had alligated at. I was dense and didn't connect the dots until much later when my sister confessed to me that She had decided to take the detour to Gran's house after getting an uneasy feeling from some creep sat behind us on the bus, who had actually followed us off of the bus and had been watching us as we entered our Gran's house before disappearing. Now, her quick instincts and reactions are probably the reason that I'm alive today.